Well, well, well. Uh, this is gonna be a one. This is gonna be some. The word controversial is much too heavy, but polarizing maybe. Because is not a good reason. There's a lot of different contexts where this comes into play, but I'll first tell you how I thought of the topic right now, and it is definitely something that just never crossed my mind to talk about before, but it's something that I think about frequently, but I just never thought to talk about it. But there is a social media account called Word Porn, and they used to, when I started following them on Facebook, and they have an Instagram as well, they used to have just, it's basically, most of the pictures are just like a white background and then black text, and it's usually a quote, or used to be a quote, and it's like in a typewriter font, and then at the bottom it just says word porn. But usually it also has the author of the quote. And when I found the page years ago and started following it, it had a lot of great quotes by like poets and authors, and just like beautiful verbiage and diction. And it was like, sometimes it was something inspirational, sometimes it was just beautiful prose, like. And over the course of time, it just, I don't know what happened, but it became really basic for the most part, and has like, instead of it being legitimately inspirational, I would say it's like faux inspirational now. It's like these reaffirming quotes to people that I would say are pretty basic, and they don't get very deep. It's shallow, surface level stuff for the most part. I still follow them because I can ignore those things, and every once in a while there is something good there. But a lot of the time, I find, and I've shared a couple things that definitely are more shallow and surface level because it appealed to the way I was feeling, for sure, and they weren't those deeper things that I originally followed them for. But then they posted this today, and this is what I want to talk about. Because I don't want to is a good enough reason. And I'm here to express my feelings about that. And it's not a good reason. I think I know what they're trying to say. And I think I know who they're appealing to as well. Their target audience there and stuff. And certain movements and things that have changed over the course of the past year or two especially. Certain things in my head anyway might reveal why I'm coming at this the way I am. But because I don't want to, in quotes, is not a good reason. It's not a reason at all. It's the absence of a reason. And I think that there's two things going on here. One is you feeling that, I mean, there's a reason why. There is a reason. Because, in and of itself, is not a reason. Usually people say that because they have a feeling that they don't understand, and they just know that they want or don't want this thing to happen, and so they tell someone who's asking them why, because. And that's a complete absence of reasoning, logic. It's a complete absence of communication, information. Like, sometimes you might know the reason, but you just don't know how to express it to someone, maybe because you are wrong in having that feeling, which is a weird thing to say, because, like, invalidating feelings is a big thing, and you should be validating people's feelings. And it's something that I've been working on a lot the past year or two, of like understanding that someone has a feeling that I'm like, why would you feel that way? This is ridiculous. This is so off base. Like, how could you feel that way? But the point is, they do feel that way. That feeling is real. Whether, and maybe it won't be, maybe they'll understand that in 15 minutes from now, or 15 hours from now, or 15 days from that point, that like the feeling that they felt then didn't make sense, but it doesn't make the feeling they're feeling any less real in the moment. In the moment, they are feeling that way. And maybe because it's a complete misunderstanding. Maybe it was an assumption that was made. Maybe it was just like miscommunication, or whatever it is. It doesn't make the feeling less legitimate it's so hard to say. I mean, when you say that someone is overreacting, you're basically saying that their feelings aren't valid, and that the feeling that they're having is not a legitimate feeling that they should be having. They should be reacting differently to the stimuli, like to the situation. They should be reacting in a different way because they are overreacting to it, you would say. But that's another way to say your feelings right now aren't valid, and that's a really dangerous game to play, a really not cool thing to say, or someone for them to feel on the other end of that, like, I can't feel the way I feel. And when someone is in a state where maybe their feelings are, I can't even say misguided, their feelings are not rooted in the reality of the situation that's actually happening, they're not going to be able to process the truth or the reality or the facts or anything anyway in that moment, right? Anyway, whole point is that saying because I don't feel it is a valid thing. Just being like, because I don't want to, is not a good reason. It's not a reason. It's not a valid reason. I really don't think that that's the type of message we should be sending out. Saying no is okay. That's the type of message we should be sending out. Saying that you don't want to do something is fine. But why don't you want to do it? Like, why are we discouraging people from communicating effectively? I feel, like, confidently feel that it's in everyone's best interest, for the most part. I mean, there's obviously special circumstances to everything, but for people to communicate effectively. That doesn't mean direct, brash, and rude, but if we want to take the example of dating, let's say online dating, that someone doesn't want to, you're just not attracted to that person that's interested in you, and you can just say, hey, I'm just not interested, and that person might go off the rails or whatever. So I understand why some people might not want to be honest or communicate effectively, but some people would rather lie and feign interest because they're scared of the outcome. But then that person continues, then you're putting yourself in a position where you are communicating with someone, lying to them, and also lengthening the amount of time you're communicating with someone that you don't want to communicate with because you want to maybe let them down easy, or you just don't want the trouble of maybe you don't want to hurt someone's feelings or whatever. But no matter what, that lie of whatever it is that you might be saying, or saying like, oh, I'm actually not looking for, oh, I actually found a boyfriend, and then you didn't, and maybe that truth comes out to the other person later. It's just a mess. Or some people just ghost you and don't respond, or some people might just block you right away, or whatever, right? Like, this is just something that has happened in the past to me. I mean, it's happened in the past to me, to be honest, where rather than someone tell me they're not interested, so many other things happen, and I'm very receptive to effective communication. Obviously, that doesn't mean that I am happy about every answer I get in any scenario about whatever we're communicating about. Someone telling me, I don't like when you do that thing, like in a relationship, I might not be receptive to at that moment. I might be like, well, what the hell? Like, I might get defensive. I might get upset. It's a possibility. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have told me. Maybe their approach was perfect and I wasn't in a good place to receive that information, and I need to do better, and I need to work on that. 100%. Those things can happen. But I feel like this because thing, just because, is a really horrible thing to teach anyone at any stage of life. And I think that sometimes it comes across in relationships, sometimes it comes across with people who aren't in relationships, where there's no interest being shown, and someone just says, yeah, I'm just not interested. Like, it should, like, I don't feel like you have a responsibility to explain yourself over and over and over and over and over again. I think that clear, concise, effective communication, and if someone's harassing you after that, that's a whole different thing. But I mean, there's other scenarios too, like parenting. It comes across a lot in parenting as well, where people, might just tell their kids because that's it. Just because I don't want to, because I don't want you to, because I said so, because I'm your parent. And I just never really believed in that, because or even as a teacher, that comes across sometimes. It's like, if someone's asking you a question, answer the question. And yeah, sometimes it's going to keep going and going and going and going and going. So if a child is challenging you and you don't have a good enough reason, you get upset. Like, I've seen that happen. And it's like, well, then your reasoning isn't good enough. You know, maybe they're challenging you and you're realizing that your logic completely falls apart and it's off base. And that's a good thing that you got challenged. It's a good thing that you have to think about your reasoning and why you want someone to do or not do something. And you should be able to communicate that effectively. I'm not perfect at doing that, not at all. But it's something that I believe in, something that I want to work on, and something that I think should be valued highly for people to work on. It's you know, like, saying because doesn't communicate anything to the other person. You may as well not say anything. Like, because saying because I don't want to, like, no, why don't you want to? You don't have to go always to the nth degree. But at the same time, if you're just going to give excuse after excuse after excuse that can be seen through, and it's obviously a lie or a lie by omission or just an untruth or a deflection. Some people want real answers. Real answers matter. Communication matters. Information matters. And in a lot of cases, so many people are just afraid to communicate effectively, and it would be saving them so much trouble. 100%. Like, it would be best for everyone in some scenarios, just for people just to communicate effectively, be honest about why or why not you don't want something to happen, or why you're not interested in doing this or doing that. And, like, going into detail quickly, concisely is something that can happen. It doesn't have to take much longer than just saying because I don't want to. Sometimes you can say the real reason and then the conversation ends. But if you give, that's the thing. If you give, I mean, it's sometimes just simple little things that snowball and become something bigger, and a conversation ensues, and it's a back and forth that doesn't need to happen just because you said, like, an excuse. And then someone's like, well, that doesn't make sense because of this. And they're like, okay, well, then it's this thing. It's like, but you said it was that thing, so which thing is it? Like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a scenario right now. I can't think of a real life one right now, even though there's been so many that have happened. But, like, if you don't have the patience for a conversation, then I guess that's your truth in that moment, and you can just say that. But, like, I don't want to talk about this right now. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the capacity for it. You know? But again, I was trying to think of a scenario where it's like, if someone says, I don't want to go to that movie because it's scary. And it's like, but we just went to a scary movie last night. I don't understand. Or, like, you said you wanted to go to this other scary movie, or I thought you enjoyed scary movies, or whatever. And if someone's saying, and then you point that out, and they're like, okay, fine. It's not because it's scary. It's because it's scary and it's this late at night. And then it's like, whatever. And you can pick apart someone's argument sometimes because it's not an argument. It's a non-truth. Ugh, sorry, why am I saying sorry? I'm getting worked up because it's something that I struggle with so much in, like, I struggle with seeing the holes in someone's argument or the flaws in someone's communication and not pointing it out. It's weird to say it's a flaw of mine because there's, like, a time and a place to do things, but I'm like, I don't like feeling like a fool. I don't like when someone can think to themselves like, oh yeah, I just said this thing and then he believed it, because I didn't believe it. I'm going to point it out. Why would I not point it out? I want someone to be straight with me. Like, you know, golden rule stuff. Like, I want someone to be honest with me. I want to be honest with them. Like, or they would want me to be honest with them, I'm sure. Right? And there's different styles of communication, and there's ways to get your message across that aren't rude, and just because someone doesn't want to hear it, that's the reality they have to deal with. You know what I mean? Like, they've got to face the facts if they're being rejected, or they just, whatever it is. Again, there's tons of different scenarios. But saying, because I don't want to, is not a valid reason. It's just simply not. You're not saying anything. You're not communicating anything other than no. And again, this kind of goes into territory of the difference between not knowing your own feelings and the difference between not wanting to communicate them to someone else. You don't have an obligation to anybody to pretty much do anything ever. Even if you say you're going to do something, there's nothing, like, I believe that when you say something, you should be held to your word, and sometimes you change your mind, and sometimes changing your mind is just a lie, which is a whole other thing. But sometimes you legitimately have gone through a bunch of stuff and you realize you don't want to commit to that thing anymore, and that should be communicated. I mean, you save a lot of trouble in communicating honestly. But again, saying because I don't want to, if you're going to go through the trouble, the big trouble of saying that, why not add a few extra words and say, I don't want to do this thing because of this reason. And it can end right there. And again, if your reason is honest and true and legitimate, someone still might not understand because they're confused because maybe you said something contradictory some other time, or maybe maybe you communicated perfectly effectively and that person just didn't understand you. They still might ask you something. That's not reason to be like, well, I just said because and that's it, and or like, you know what I mean, or want to just not bother with communicating with someone. Oh man, I don't even know where to go with this. Off the rails. Don't communicate then. Just don't communicate at all. If you're not going to communicate effectively, just don't communicate. Take a minute, bow out of the conversation for as long as it takes, and then communicate when you can. Communicate effectively when you feel you have gathered your thoughts together, when you know what the truth is, and when you're willing to actually express that truth in its entirety rather than just saying, because I said so. It's just so lame, lazy, and again, there's this thing happening where I'm like, are you saying because you don't want to explain it? And why don't you want to explain it? Because you feel like you don't have to explain it? You don't want that same courtesy extended to you then? Or are you saying because you don't even understand your own feelings? Either way, it's unacceptable. I feel like if you don't understand your own feelings, then you should at least understand that you don't understand your own feelings. And if you start to feel the words come out because, and that's it, or because I said so, or because I don't want, if you know that you're not giving a legitimate reason, then that's a sign to you that you don't even understand yourself. So maybe in that moment you need to say, I'll explain later. Like, I obviously am having, I'm overwhelmed. I'm anxious or I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. I know that I'm having a visceral reaction, an emotional reaction. I don't want this thing that's happening, and I'll have to discuss it later. It obviously depends on the nature of the scenario we're talking about. You won't have an opportunity to discuss it later. And there's allowances for everything that makes sense, but I just think that as a blanket statement, just saying, hey, because I don't want to is a legitimate reason, it's not. Like, again, there's a time and a place for most things, and I could see how someone could be overwhelmed in a scenario and they just say no and have no explanation, and that's perfectly valid in some scenarios too. But I feel like as just a thing being like, hey, you can just say because I don't want to in any scenario and it's okay. You don't need to explain yourself. Why? Why would we be pushing people towards non-communication? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, don't be a social person then. Don't have relationships of any kind if you're not willing to put in any effort to actually express yourself. Again, it's a very nuanced thing. I don't want to make blanket statements either. I've been trying to add the caveats in as I see them, but as that statement stands by itself, I think that it's a negative and bad practice in teaching. So with that, we'll see you on another time.